Okay, so good morning everyone to today's Reactor session. Today's session will be on Microsoft Lists fundamentals, and we're welcoming back Chris Horde, who is a Microsoft Certified Trainer, Regional Lead, and Chris will be delivering today's session. There is a Q&A window for you to submit any questions that you have throughout, so please feel free to use that. And also just any feedback on the session, comments that you have, everything like that can go into the Q&A. Just want to point out at this stage that we will be recording this session, so that link will go onto the YouTube Reactor channel, and I'll share that out on the Meetup pages once the session has finished. So I'll hand over to Chris to get us started with today's session.
Thank you very much, Emma, and welcome everyone to Microsoft List Fundamentals. My name is Chris Horde. I'm a Partner Education Lead from here in the UK, and I'm really pleased to be back and thank you ever so much for taking the time for the session today. So just before we start out, we have our code of conduct. Microsoft is dedicated to empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And just on the right hand side there, we just need to be aware of others and be welcoming and respectful. So in the comments, please keep in mind that there are lots of other people that may have different viewpoints on the call. Thanks for that. So what to expect from the session? We're going to break it down into three parts. We're going to look at what are Microsoft Lists. Secondly, we're going to look at how we use Microsoft Lists, so all the different types of ways that we can create and what kind of governance and management functionality we have. And third of all, we're going to look at what's next, what the roadmap is until the end of the year. Microsoft Lists is something that is in rapid development at the current time. So what you see today, there are going to be lots of more functionality forthcoming. So just a little bit of mindfulness about the session in terms of also what to expect. It's a level 100 to 200 introductory session. In other words, we're not going to go too far into the reads on this. It's going to be very simple. It's all designed for you to understand what lists are, how we use them day to day, and some of that good stuff that's coming down the pipe. Secondly, the scope of this talk today is going to be on the core Microsoft Lists web app experience. Now, it's also surfaced into Teams and also the mobile application, as I will discuss, but we're going to concentrate on the web app experience when it was first released and what most people are using it for today. Just a little caveat about this session. As said, it's in rapid development and it's rapidly changing. So what you see today is going to be valid for 6 to 8 weeks from this point, but after that it could start changing in the way that it functions. So just to keep that in mind. So this is absolutely valid for at least the next couple of months. And also as well, there are further learning after this session. So you will see the link down there. I will repeat this link at the end. If you just want to take a quick screenshot or snapshot or quickly write it down on Notepad, it's important that after every single one of these Reactor sessions, you can go on and take your learning forward. Now, this session on Microsoft Lists is based within SharePoint, so this link will direct to a Microsoft Learn page that helps you to understand a little bit more about SharePoint, where the core web app experience is based. So to start out with what are Microsoft Lists and to introduce them, Microsoft Lists are a Microsoft 365 application that's designed to help you track information and organize work. In other words, it's an application that's designed to help you create and manage lists. Now, lists in themselves are not things that are new to Microsoft 365. Microsoft Lists are an evolution and encompasses SharePoint lists. So if you've been using lists within SharePoint that have been around for many years, what this is doing is going one step further, is surfacing lists throughout the whole Microsoft 365 stack so that they can be used across the ecosystem. Now, lists were publicly announced at Build 2020 back in May and are currently still in a state of rolling out. And what that means is that the core web app experience that we will show today, this was released in July It was surfaced into Microsoft Teams in September, and now is currently being rolled out in a public beta to iOS devices and probably later on Android. So that's quite an important point, because it means that Microsoft Lists moving forward is not just accessible within a web app, within this core web app. It is also an app within Microsoft Teams or a mobile app, so you can access it in many different ways. And I do plan in a few months' time to come back to the Reactor to do another session on lists within Microsoft Teams and as a part of that mobile app experience. So that's just a little bit of the background on lists. So delving in a little bit more about what lists are, as we've said, they're a Microsoft 365 app designed to help you track information and organize work. And I think we're probably all familiar with what lists are by definition. They're a number of connected items or names that are written or printed consecutively. So I think that from a conceptual standpoint, we all know the Microsoft Lists app is putting that app into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So I just want to start out in the top right hand side with giving you a few simple scenarios as to how we would use lists. So let's take number one. I want to create a list of all the managed mobile devices inside my organization. Let's say that I've got an organization that is 25 users, and as part of that organization, I issue every single one of them managed mobile phones. Well, a list would be ideal to keep track of all those mobile phones, keep track of things like the operating system number, the vendor, so whether it's Apple or Sony, for example, who that device is assigned to, when that device was last serviced. So that list is what we would call an inventory. So Microsoft Lists is ideal in that situation to manage those mobile devices and keep track of them. The second scenario, moving away from an inventory to more of an instruction or event planning. Let's take the scenario that, again, I have an organization of 25 users, and as part of that, I've got a marketing department, and I want to create a list of repeatable steps that the team has to take to launch any online event. So imagine we do lots of digital events, whether that's for IT products or for let's just say something like legal products or health products or education products, for example. Well, lists is ideal in that scenario because we can create an easy list of repeatable steps that the team can follow every time. It standardizes the process and ensures a quality of delivery. But those two very simple scenarios, they are just two of an unimaginable amount of use cases. So I've listed some of them here to help give you some ideas. Lists can be used for issue tracking, for itineraries, for contact lists, for business trip approvals, for roadmaps, or for KPIs. They can be used in every single department across the business. Now, if we're thinking about alternative applications that people might be using today, but may want to consider moving to Microsoft Lists, these would be apps such as Asana, Rike, or Monday.com. Those are the type of products that are similar to Microsoft Lists. And so when we view Microsoft Lists, we need to do so when comparing them to these other products. Now, we've understood what Microsoft Lists are. Okay, we need finding out a little bit more detail before we get into the demonstration. So firstly, it's really important to distinguish lists from other applications within the Microsoft 365 stack, and you will probably be asked this question in consideration. We've just talked about use cases. Can I use Microsoft Lists for tasks? And the short answer to that is yes, you can. You can add tasks as list items within a list. But the question is, should you? As you can see, by definition, tasks and lists are different, but they can be used together. But Microsoft themselves, in its literature over the last 6 months, has tried to very much distinguish lists from other task apps within Microsoft 365. So when we think of those task apps, we have Planner for our tasks for teams, we have To Do, which is for our personal tasks, and indeed within Microsoft Teams, we are seeing the development of tasks for Microsoft Teams, which blends Planner and To Do together. So when you start to roll out lists, it's very, very important to distinguish them from other apps, including those tasks apps. So Microsoft distinguishes them, as you can see there in the picture. But one of the, I would say, the most useful is over on the right-hand side. So this is provided by AvePoint. It's a breakdown comparing lists to Planner, To Do, and tasks in Microsoft Teams. And as you can see in that picture by AvePoint, there are other applications that are probably better to manage tasks than to use lists. So it's really important to distinguish lists from other applications in order to land it within inside your organization. In terms of prerequisites, what we need to get going. So for the web app experience that we're looking at today, you need an Office or Microsoft 365 plan, and you also need SharePoint enabled for your users, because lists is Microsoft Lists is built upon SharePoint. So what I'd recommend in that situation for a few of your users as well is to, inside your Microsoft 365 Admin Center, is set a subset of users to targeted release. Therefore, they will get all of the new lists functionality before others who are on standard, and they can support other users within their organization as this new functionality is released. If we move beyond the web app and we want to start looking at lists within Microsoft Teams or mobile, for Microsoft Teams, you need Teams enabled within the Office or Microsoft 365 license. You also need to have lists enabled within your app permission policy. For mobile, from the public beta and moving forward, if users want to install Microsoft Lists on mobile, the user would need App Store access and install rights on the mobile device. Otherwise, in the future, if you are managing devices for your users, you will probably want to use something like Intune. Where is this list data stored? So this is one of the final things before we get onto the demo. Lists, as previously said, is built upon and encompasses SharePoint lists. So all of the list data is a technology that's built upon SharePoint. So the majority of the data is stored within SharePoint and OneDrive. Now, it's really important that we understand when we start using the application where our data is stored, but it's also important because it begins to distinguish between two different types of lists. So if I jump into the list admin center here, if I go to create a new list, so this is going to now, if I go to create a blank list, if you see down here, it will show save to my lists or save to recent sites. Now, this in the lists application shows the distinguishment between two different types of lists. My lists are personal lists, and these lists are housed within OneDrive for Business. So if I create a list and house it in my lists, that is being put, and the data is being put in OneDrive. If I go and create a list and I put it in a site, those lists are what are called team lists that are being stored in SharePoint sites. So it's really important to make that distinction. So if you choose to create a personal list or a Teams list, they will be stored in different locations. And if you do not want to have users create personal lists and store that information within OneDrive, you would much prefer them just to have it in SharePoint, then you can disable personal lists via PowerShell. Now the comments on lists, and we will see what these are stored in a schema of each list and use SharePoint storage too. Now, considering that OneDrive is a part of SharePoint, pretty much all of the information in lists is housed within SharePoint, but there is one caveat. So if you use Microsoft Lists in Teams, then if you're doing commenting on those list items, then that's actually stored in Azure. So it's the only kind of part of the data that's not stored within SharePoint or OneDrive. So you just have to bear that in mind. So we've had a little look about what Microsoft Lists are. We've looked at what they are. We've looked at a few scenarios and use cases. We have had a look at basically the prerequisites. and we've had a look at distinguishing them from other applications within the stack. So now it's all about the how. How do we use Microsoft Lists? And we begin with accessing lists, and there are two ways to do that. So once you've logged in to the Microsoft, so let me clear this down. Once I've logged in to Office 365 on the web, Lists is very easy to access. You will see it on the left-hand side, one click of the icon, and we're in to the Lists web application. In addition, if I click on All Apps, you will see Lists there on the right-hand side. So that's one way. Okay, the Microsoft 365 home screen is the easiest way, but I've heard from time to time that some users have not been able to see lists within the Microsoft 365 home screen, and there's a kind of a workaround, the back door to this, and this was the way before the List web app was actually GA. So what we do is we access lists from OneDrive, and it's very easy to do. So back in my demo environment, I actually select OneDrive if I don't see lists. So I'm in my OneDrive, and you'll see up the top I have a URL. All I do is replace OneDrive by Lists and click enter, and then that takes me into Microsoft Lists. Okay, so it is really, kind of important that, you kind of understand that there are multiple ways with which to access the Lists web app. Now, as soon as we access the Lists web app, is going to be empty because we haven't created lists before. So there are 4 ways to do that. There is a blank list, which is starting a list from scratch from an Excel when we upload an Excel formatted as a table, from an existing list where we clone the columns, or from a template provided by Microsoft. We're going to look at all of these different cases. So I'm in the Lists web app, and I click on New List right at the very top, and then I click Blank List. So this is starting from scratch. Nothing has been created before. This is a completely new list. So I give it a name. So I'm going to call this Reactor List 1. I'm going to give it a description. I'm just going to copy the name. I give it a color, and then I will give it an icon. Now, these colors and icons is to easily distinguish your list. If you're a visual kind of worker and learner like I am, then it's very easy to remember certain lists dependent upon visual images and colors. So this is a great accessibility feature. Now, it says, where am I going to save it to? I'm not going to create this as a personal list. I'm going to create this as a Teams list where all my team can have access to it, and then I'm going to create it. So a very easy creation process, and there we go. My list has been created. So I have a title, and that is all. I don't have any other columns. Now imagine I'm creating a list for those mobile devices. Okay, so I'm going to add a few columns. So let's say vendor. Okay, and another single line of text, owner. So this is a very, very simple. So I've given it 2 columns. So I'm going to have my mobile device, the vendor, and the owner of the device. And if I click down, you can see that there are many different types of columns we can create, whether they are single line columns, whether they are location, yes, no, choices, currency. If you've used SharePoint Lists before, you're going to be very, very familiar with this. You can see the kind of the heritage and the legacy by building on SharePoint Lists. So I created a few columns. I click on New to create my first list item. Okay, so let's call this an iPhone 8. Okay, the vendor is Apple, and the owner is my colleague Vesa. Click Save, and there we go. There's my first list item that I create. Let's just create one more. I'm going to call this an iPhone 8, and the vendor is Apple, but the owner is my colleague Adam. So you can see that the start of my list is being created there. So we would then go and add our list items, and as you say, you can enrich them with many different types of columns. So that was creating a list from scratch, which was the first one. and they're, like I say, the amount of scenarios or the use scenarios is as many as you can imagine. Now, from Excel, this allows us to create a list from an existing Excel spreadsheet. So if I click from Excel, okay, you can either upload from your device, or okay, you could already have an Excel that's already been uploaded, for example, to a SharePoint site. You can then import that into Microsoft Lists. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose this equipment list. So this is a list, again, that's about mobile devices, similar to the last example that we used. And as you can see, it's taken the columns and all the data from that Excel spreadsheet. So this is a really great way if you've got lists on Excel spreadsheets that are lying around within your business and you want to move them up easily into Microsoft Lists. The important thing to bear in mind here is that you have to format the list as a table, otherwise you will not see this data and you will not be able to import it. So that's just something to bear in mind. So you can see all this pre-populated data on my Excel spreadsheet. I click next. Okay, I'm going to call this reactor list 2, give it a color and an icon, and again I'm going to save this as a team list as opposed to a personal list. So I'm just going to go ahead and create that. Now this takes a little time depending upon the data, but as you saw there, it's very quick. And now I have a list with all of my populated data. So you can see the devices that I have all around my business, not just phones, but Surface Hub and peripherals as well. I can see all the vendors. I can see all of the owners of that. That's brilliant. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Now, from an existing list, this clones the columns from an existing list into a new list. It doesn't clone the data. So this is really good in scenarios such as I've got a new month, I need to do a new list from scratch. I want to use the columns, but I don't want to populate the data, for example. So I go to new list, and instead of blank or Excel, I click on from existing list. Then what I would do is I would clone from an existing list, click next, give it a name, give it a color, give it an icon, and save as a personal list or a Teams list. Create that again, and there we go. So you can see that it's taken the columns, but it's got no data in it. So again, like I say, this is really effective, whereby, you know, I could just see a list and that my organization has, and I want to use the list personally or use it for my team. I don't want to spend time copying all those columns or formatting, for example. I would just, you know, kind of clone it to use it for my own or my team's ends. So that's a really good scenario. Last but not least, we have from a template. So these are pre-designed templates from Microsoft. So if I click on a new list, you can see that I've got my templates there. Now these templates are, I would say, examples that Microsoft have provided to help you get on your way quickly. So when you first start using lists and it's blank, you could be at a loss for ideas as to how to use it kind of very succinctly. So this helps you as a scaffold to get you on your way. So let me just choose one. Okay, so I'm going to choose a template. This gives you a peek of what the list will actually look like. So you can see there that I've got you know, my work description. I've got almost like a RAG status for to be completed, the date that it's been completed, and it's linked to people within inside my organization. So it's very easy. I want to use this template. I click on use template and I give it same process as always, give it a name, give it a color, and give it an icon, and then I will choose a team list again. And there we go. So you can see that I've got all of the columns from the template, and I can start populating it with my own data. Now, to summarize, there's many different ways to create lists. In regards to templates, whilst templates can be very helpful to get started, it can also cause some organizations confusion whether they should use those templates specifically or not. Now, Some organizations love it, some organizations don't, and they wish that they could get rid of the templates. Well, last month, Microsoft rolled in the ability for templates to be disabled. So you would use PowerShell, and there's the command down the bottom, set SPO tenant disable modern list template IDs, and you would put in the template IDs. I have a blog at Microsoft365pro.co.uk where I've got an article on there that shows you step by step how to do that. Now, moving on from creating lists, okay, some added things that we can do all up to lists is that we can very easily favorite lists. So why would we favorite list? There's a few reasons. There could be a list that you've recently used that you may have had to step away and come back to. You could have lists that you use a lot. So rather than, if you've got hundreds of lists trying to search for it, you might want to just have that list to hand. And third of all, you might just have a list that has interest that you might just want to easily dive in and out on a frequent basis. So going back into the lists web app, you can see that I've got my favorites at the top, but how do I favorite them? Well, it's very simple. You just imagine that we created one of these lists in the previous demo. All we would do is hover over that list, click on the star, and as you can see, it's now been added to our favorite list and vice versa. So it's very, very easy to favorite and unfavorite, much easier than trying to do it through the Teams experience, which really hasn't got this functionality and needs to be worked around. So the ability to favorite lists, very easy to do. One of the more important functionalities is the ability to be able to share lists and list items, because even if we create them as personal lists or whether we create them as team lists, we're probably going to be working on these lists collaboratively with other people. So we need to be able to share them, and that's sharing both with users within the organization and outside of the organization. And this is very, very easy to do from both a list and a list item perspective. So going back into the web app, let's say that I want to share a list. Let's say I want to share the reactor list, one of those ones that I created. So I'm just going to favorite that to bring it up the top. I'm going to click on the three little buttons down the bottom, and then I click share, and this shares the whole list. So there's somebody outside my organization. So I'm going to say my colleague Vesku, who's another MVP. He's outside the organization, and I'm going to set what he can actually do on that list. So we're working on it together. It's a list that we're collaborating together. So I'm going to give him the edit permissions. I'm not going to give him full control, but on the other hand, I'm going to give him more than just the ability to view. So I click can edit. It's going to notify him. I can add a message. Here is the list. And then I'm going to grant him access. So you can see his access has been granted. He will get an email with a link that will bring him to the list. He can access it and begin to edit it. In addition, if I need to remove him, I simply come back to share. Up the top right hand corner for more options, I click manage access, and then I can either amend his permissions or I can stop sharing with him altogether. So it's really, really easy to be able to share a list with others. Now, sharing a list item, we drill into the list itself. I've got all these different list items. So all we need to do next to the actual list item is click the share icon. That's probably the easiest way. So I want to share this particular list item, and the experience is very similar. So I'm going to share this again with Vesku. Here is the list item. Okay. And I can choose whether I want to share that anyone with the link or with specific people, whether they can edit it. I can also give or set, should I say, an expiration date. So if I only wanted to share that with him for 7 days, I absolutely can do. So I'm going to click apply. And then I'm going to send. Now, if I wanted to remove him, similar process again. I click the share button, come up to the right hand side, manage access, and then I can then remove him or change his permissions. So some things to bear in mind about sharing. Okay, you get edit, read, or full control permissions, whether on list or list items. Why would we share a list item as opposed to sharing a list? Well, we could have sensitive lists within inside our organization, which or we want to share with multiple external users from different companies. A couple of things to remember: by default, team, if you've got a Teams list and that's housed within SharePoint, then team members have edit by default, and guests inside the SharePoint environment or within Teams, as it were, have read by default. But again, those permissions can be modified. All the sharing is controlled by the SharePoint Admin Center. So if I'm in my 365 environment, I would come here. So I would access the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So you can see that's just loading up now. Okay, just load him. Not to be displaying. I'll just try that once more time. Okay, seems to be a little bit of time. We'll come back to that later on. But all the sharing is controlled through the SharePoint Admin Center. So within the SharePoint Admin Center, what we can see is we can see the sharing settings for both SharePoint and OneDrive. So that is ultimately where it's controlled. So as well as the data being housed in SharePoint and OneDrive, it's the SharePoint Admin Center where you can set either the sharing settings for SharePoint and Teams lists or OneDrive and personal lists. So moving on, okay, from sharing, we can customize a list, so we can restyle it. So if we need to change the visuals, if we need to change the color, if we need to change the name, we can do so. Now the use cases for this, there could be a typo, we may need to rebrand a list, or it could indeed just be a functional name change. It might be something that we've thought about doing for some time. So we come back into the Lists web app. Let's say that I wanted to change we have a name of reactor for this list, but I want to make a change. All we do is, instead of share, we click customize. So we can change the name if we want. So we just call this reactor name change. I change the color and I change the icon and I click save. And as you can see there, it now looks visually different. If we're grouping our lists by colors, if the icon is a visual reference, or as said, if we just need to change the name to change the function of the list, or that it's managed by a different place in the business. Very easy to go and customize our list. In terms of exporting it, very easy. Again, this is something, so you can see everything so far is very, very easy to do. If we want to export a list, because sometimes from time to time we may want to review it offline, we may want to review it in Excel in order to make some changes and then re-import the list, or sometimes we may just have a local backup. So we've got it in the cloud within Microsoft Lists, but we might just want to take a backup and store it in our OneDrive or on SharePoint, for example. It's very easy to export that list. So back inside the web app, I would click on the list itself, and right up the top, as you can see, export to Excel. I click the button once, and then it would download an IQY file, which you can then open in Excel. So I can get a copy very, very quickly and very, very easily at one click of a button. In terms of the life cycle of lists, from time to time, we're going to want to delete the lists. They may not be useful anymore. We might just be disposing of the data. It could be legacy. We can't do that within the list itself, or even from the actual web app page. So there's nowhere here where we can do that. So we would come into the list itself. Up the top right hand side, you will see a cog appear. So we click on the list settings, and then we would then, right in the middle of the page, delete the list. We click on delete the list. It will say, are you sure you want to send it to the recycle bin? And that is our list deleted. But in deleting lists, it's also important to know that we can restore lists. So if they are personal lists, they go into the OneDrive recycle bin. If they are Teams lists, they are restored from the SharePoint site recycle bin. And we can recover both of them unless we've gone into the recycle bin and deleted them, or we've waited a period of time and they've been purged from the recycle bin. So if we've made a mistake, we've accidentally deleted, or another member of the team's accidentally deleted the wrong list, then it should be recoverable, whether that list is a personal list or a team's list. So very, very important. Now, drilling down, we will move the conversation quickly from lists to actually list items. Now, list items, as you see, we've built today in our list. Here are all the list items, and we need to like working lists in a little bit more detail. We have filters and views to be able to splice the information. So to be able to filter what's on the list, you can come up to the filters in the top right, and as you can see, there are many ways based upon the columns with which we can filter. So let's just see, I want to see all the devices that Chris owns. I come down to the owner and I click Chris, and there we go. I've got the view that I want to see. In addition, we can pin columns by the column settings into the filters. So just to see if you don't see a column within that filter, we can always go to pin it. So by using filters, we can splice the list to kind of surface the information that we want. In addition, there are different views. There are different views to how to view lists. So I'm going to show you an example. I'm going to go into another list, which will give you a good view. Okay, so here is the list that I have. It's based upon an event and all sessions that I'm running in an event. Now, if I go up to all items, you can see that I'm sitting in the default list view. This is what it looks like. In addition, I've got the ability to change it to a compact view. So this compacts all of the list items so that you can see more on one page. I've also got out of the box the gallery view, which gives me a card-like view. If you look at this, this looks in many ways a lot nicer from my list view, and I can simply hover over a join link to be able to join the session that I want. So these are three default views. We also have the new calendar view that came in kind of a short while ago. So you can see here, I've got the calendar view. Let me just click on it. So this came in, I think it was a few weeks ago. So I can put all my list items on a calendar view, which is really effective if we're doing lists based upon events or seminars. In order to create that calendar view, we would simply come down to create new view and click on calendar view to get that view. If we wanted to set the calendar view as a default, we can set the current view as default. So this is really, kind of really effective. We also have the grid view. Now the grid view is not here, okay, in the all items view, but it's right next to the new list item bottom. So I'm going to go back to the list. I'm going to edit in the grid view. It puts all of the fields into a grid so they can be easily amended. So I'm going to amend this track title. I'm just going to call it adoption. And then this helps us to easily edit those lists. I'm now going to exit the grid view. We also have the ability to have custom views, and we also have the ability to do conditional formatting. So conditional formatting, you can see here, I've got a column and it's bold and in blue and has a little icon. How is it that we achieve this? We simply click on the column. We then go to column settings. We then format the actual column, and you can then use conditional formatting. So for example, I want to change the field color. I want to use more styles to be able to put it in bold. This is a great way of kind of bringing lists to life and making them kind of more palatable, more visually appealing, but also more useful, again, if you work on almost on a visual perspective. So we have filters and views. That's one way we can work within lists. Also as well, we've got edit and reordering. So in order to bulk edit, because sometimes we might not just want to edit things line by line, otherwise that would get quite tiring. We can simply click up the top and then we can bulk edit. So we can change, if I wanted to change that track back because I made a mistake and I wanted to change it back to adoption and governance, I can do. I can click save. And there we go. You can see that the track name is back. In addition, if I'm in grid view and I make a change, just a couple of days ago, the undo feature came in, which makes it a lot safer to make changes to lists. So if I undo that, and I can also redo, you can cache 100 actions on undo and redo. So just a note, so it's much safer from this point to be able to make amendments to lists. I can move my columns very easily just by dragging and dropping. So if I drag it there, you will see the column move. And if I want to delete that column, all I need to do is go to I think it's the column settings. Okay, I go to edit, and then you can see down the bottom, a little bit out of sight is the delete button. But you have to be aware that when deleting columns, you cannot get them back. They will be permanently deleted. They're not put in the recycle bin. So we just have to be a bit careful when deleting columns. So those are a few more actions. In addition, we can comment on list items. This is a recent addition to list 2. This gives the ability to collaborate and work with list items within a team or with people outside your organization. It could be for a review of the list item. It could be new ideas or new fields to add. It could be issues with the current item. In order to be able to do that, right next to the list icon, you have the comment icon. So you click in that comment icon, you can see that I've already put a comment in there. Let me just put another one. How's it going? And there we go. Now, what's the really cool thing about this is that this also, if this is a Teams list and you've got the Teams app open or the Lists app open in Teams, when you put a comment on this list, it will go into the channel, the associated channel conversation. So one person can be commenting in Teams, another person can be commenting in the web app. This is a really great functionality to have. Very shortly, they're going to be adding mentions so that you can actually get notification when somebody has added a comment. Alerts is the ability to notify you if the data is modified. So this is something that's been historical from SharePoint Online. Within inside the list, if I click on the 3 little buttons, alert me, and I can create alerts. So whether somebody changes or adds a new item or removes a new item. So you can see here, I'm just going to call this new notification. And here's, it's going to go to me. It's going to give me an email, all changes, if anything changes. But instead of sending it immediately, I might just want a daily summary. And it's going to send me a summary. I click OK. And then that's been created under the alerts. You can see I've just created a new alert. So we may, if we're a manager or if we're the owner of a list, may want to be kept up to date when that list has been changed. But probably we're going to want to use something more modern rather than the old alerting functionality. So we can do that with Power Platform integration. So one of the greatest things about Microsoft Lists and being surfaced into Microsoft 365 is that we can now begin to integrate it with other applications and extend it. And this is exactly what the Power Platform does. So if we use Power Apps and within the list, you can see here, Power Apps, I can create an app that's based on that list. So the list becomes the gallery within the application. So there's a screenshot of it there on the bottom left. The one that I'd like to probably show you today is with Power Automate. So we can build flows to connect lists with other services such as Microsoft Teams. So we can kind of almost replicate that alerting functionality through Power Automate. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to open Power Automate. I'm going to also open Microsoft Teams. So this might just take a second whilst we're doing this. I'm just going to wait. Now I have, so if I go to my flows within Power Automate, okay, you will see a list item. So I'm just going to edit this and show you what the flow is. So when an item is created, that is going to post a message into an actual team itself. So if I open up Teams, still not ready yet. Okay, so you can see this is a very simple, it's got a simple SharePoint trigger and it's got a Teams action. So every time somebody adds something to the list. Now, here's my list. I'm going to click on new. I'm going to add new item. So I'm going to call this Teams Adoption Session 12. Enter today's date. Track. Okay. Adoption and governance. Speaker is going to be Vesku. The moderator is going to be Chirag. Okay. Join link. HTTPS. teamsnation.rocks/adoption, and then I'm going to save it. So you can see that I've added my new item to my list. I'm going to now trigger manually my flow. And inside my list, inside Teams, okay. So the flow's running. There we go. You can see it's just come up. So I've added that list item. The flow has triggered. It now tells me within my team that that session has now been added. I can join it. I can also look at the list item itself. So Power Automate is really, really good for being able to connect Microsoft Lists with other applications, including Microsoft Teams. Now, the other way to extend it, in addition to Power Automate, is to use custom applications that have been built. One that I just wanted to show you is Share to Teams. So this is an extension that was built by Joe Ferreira. He's a Portuguese MVP, and he created an SPPKG file that you would install into the SharePoint app catalog, and you can begin to use it right away. So this allows lists or list items to be shared into Microsoft Teams. So let's say I had this item here, which is a list item. I wanted to share it with the rest of my users in Teams. I simply install that SPPKG file into the app catalog. I would then click on, so these two buttons have been added, open in SharePoint and share list to Teams. I click on the share to Teams. It would ask me a team, okay, and a channel with which to put it in, and I could give it a notification. Here is the list item to review, and I would click share. So the link has been shared. I go back into Teams, and there we go. You can see that that's pushed that straight into Microsoft Teams. So in addition to extending via Power Automate, we can have community applications that have been built by people like Joe in order to enrich the functionality of Microsoft Lists. So to sum up, lists are simple. We can easily create, share, and track list items. I've hoped within the last kind of 40 minutes, particularly in the demos, I've showed you that you can get up to speed very, very quickly. They're simple. They're not, vastly technical things. It's very easy to spend a day or two just building lists and removing items to get to grips with them. They're smart. They keep everyone in sync with adds, changes, and removals. So by building these Teams lists, people will have access. We can share them with people inside or outside of the organization, and we can keep up to date with adds and removals either through alerting or through Power Automate, which I showed you in this session. Last but not least, these lists are flexible. You would customize your list to your business needs. As we kind of circling back to the beginning, there are many different use cases, and it's really limited by your imagination. Microsoft have even provided you pre-populated templates to help you get started, and you can, because of all the different views now, you've got the list view, you've got the gallery view, you've got the calendar view. You can create lists in all different ways for all different use cases. So lists do not have to be the same across the organization or have to be boring. You can use rich formatting. You can use them with these different views. So what's next on the roadmap? Okay, so Teams was enabled back in September. The mobile app's in public beta. There is the link there, aka.ms/MS-lists iOS/preview. So just while I'm talking about the rest, if you grab that, you can enroll into the public beta of the mobile app for iOS. So a couple of weeks ago, views came in. So all the views that were promised at build when it was first announced, grid, gallery and calendar, have now been delivered. The undo and redo functionality that was promised at the end of the year, that's also been added. There's some exciting stuff to come. Firstly, we have rules, which are if this, then that functions. In other words, if you change a list item, it will change other things in the list or trigger an action elsewhere. Secondly, we've got offline working. So this is the ability to use lists offline. So whether it's in the web app or in Microsoft Teams, because today, if you haven't got an internet connection, sadly, you cannot use lists. Last but not least is mentions in list items, as I alluded to earlier. So when we're doing commenting, whether in the web app or in Microsoft Teams, if we mention somebody, they will be notified, which means is that we can keep the conversation going or specifically call out people. So cycling back, we've looked at three things. We've looked at what are Microsoft lists, we've looked at how we use Microsoft lists, and we've briefly touched upon what's next. This was a level 100 to 200 introductory session. We focused on the web app, and just a caveat, everything you see here is going to be valid at least for the next few months, but of course where it's rapidly changing, then what you've seen today may become legacy. And for further learning, if you haven't taken that link at the beginning, please do so now, because it's really important to continue your learning after this session. So aka.ms/MS-list fundamentals-A. And in a few months' time, I'll be back with a similar session to this to use Microsoft Lists with Microsoft Teams. So that's a thank you from today. I really hope you've enjoyed the session and got a lot out of it. You can contact me via my email, chris.horde@fusion.cloud. Alternatively, you can connect with me on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Microsoft365pro.co.uk is my blog, where I blog on a lot on Teams, a lot on lists, a lot on the functionalities between the two. So everything you've seen today will also be on that blog. In terms of what's next, 2021 is going to be a busy year. You can catch me at all of these other events. We're starting to book up already. The next one, because this is the last time, funnily enough, I'm actually doing public speaking this year. The next time I'm speaking is at Modern Workplace Conference Paris. It's one of the biggest events in modern workplace for the Microsoft year. So that's free to attend. So I would look into that. I'm speaking on Teams as a platform. So I guess that's time. Now we've got some time kind of left, is to ask Emma if there is any questions that have come up so far in the session.
Great, thanks, Chris. There's quite a few questions even that have come through. So we'll start from the beginning. So Dan asked, how many items can you have in a list? Are they permanent if you want them to be?
So list items, in terms of, is there a limit? That's all available in the SharePoint limit. So if you just quickly type in within an internet search docs.com Microsoft Lists limits, that will take you to a documentation page with all of the limits. In case of whether they're permanent or not, those list items, yes, they are. They're not kind of temporal in terms of that you would add list items and then for 6 months and then suddenly that they would disappear. So once you've added them, they are permanent at this current time. If you did want to have time sensitive lists, then I'd recommend going to going to user voice. So there's a SharePoint user voice and raising it there, because Microsoft product teams looks at the user voice. Also as well, I'm happy to carry that back internally to Microsoft, because I know the PM for Microsoft Lists, and I can put that feedback back to.
Great. So next question, how does Microsoft Lists integrate with Forms? Is it possible to subscribe to the changes made to Teams list, weekly, monthly notifications to the changes made to the list?
Yep, so we showed within alerting or within Power Automate, you can set up alerting to show you the changes that have happened in lists. So there are 2 ways for you to do that. So hopefully the session kind of answered your question on that regard. In terms of the integration within Forms, okay, do you know what? I imagine that's possible by using Power Automate. So when we complete a form today, the information goes to an Excel on the back of the form. But I can see the point that that it would be good for it to go into a list. So if there is a way, then Power Automate would be that way today. Alternatively, you can have the form responses go into the Excel, take the Excel and upload the Excel to a Microsoft list. So, you'd have to make some amendments in terms of putting column names in and formatting it to a table, but that wouldn't take very long to do. So you can either do it manually or try to see you can do it via Power Automate, one of the 2. It would be great to see a native functionality between the 2, as in the forms automatically goes to lists rather than an Excel, because we want to try and get away from files where we can. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great. So another question around integration. So how does Microsoft Lists integrate with Forms, SharePoint, Exchange Online and Power Automate?
Okay, so with SharePoint, okay, let's break that down. We just discussed Forms. Okay, so you could potentially do it a couple of ways with Forms. How to integrate with SharePoint? Well, Teams lists that you create are lists within SharePoint. So what, if I go back into my environment, so this is a list, okay, so I click on lists. So I think it was this list here, so Reactor List 2. So this is the list that we created. It's a Teams list, it's not a personal list. Going back to that point, when you house, okay, or when you build these lists and you build personal lists, they're housed in OneDrive. SharePoint lists or Teams lists that you create are housed within SharePoint. So what you're looking at in this list, you're looking at this list, but this list is actually housed within SharePoint. So if I go to, let's say I go into Teams and I go to Files, okay. So I'm going to then quickly open this site within SharePoint. So this is the SharePoint list. You can see, look, there are all of those lists that I just created. So if I click on one list, I'm looking at that list within SharePoint, as opposed to looking at list within the List web app. So there's really deep integration between lists and SharePoint and OneDrive, where the data is both housed. In terms of Exchange, there's not really an explicit link between the 2 currently. Maybe there will be in the future, or maybe you can try to connect the 2 again with Power Automate. So every time a list is added, it would, for example, send you an email into Exchange to notify you that it's been added. So there's no kind of like native that they're made to work together. You would use something like Power Automate. If you want any more than that, I'm happy to discuss it. You just need to go into a little bit more detail. Okay.
Great, thanks, Chris. Next question. So in the calendar view, would the times match the user's system time? I.e., I set an event in GMT, will a user in IST see it in their time zone?
As far as I know, it does, but I don't like confirming anything that I'm not 100% sure on. So what I'd recommend that you do is you have two users, you create a list, you create a calendar view in the list that you're creating really quickly. So you do two list items, okay, and then what you do is you have two users, one that are based in each different time zone, and that time zone is set within their settings within 365 to look at it. I imagine, okay, it's very much like Exchange, that it will be, because it wouldn't make any sense to not show in people's time zones for which their settings are set. Okay, so I'm going to give that one a tentative yes, but I would say subject to testing, I would test that.
Great. Next question. Is there a possibility of versioning in lists, or once the changes are made, is there a way to go back?
Okay, so you can within list items, okay, I think it's in more, okay, you have the compliance details within there. In terms of versioning within, do you mean versioning of list items?
It doesn't quite specify here, so maybe if that person can comment again.
Yeah, if that person can comment again, and then I would be happy to kind of build on that, because it's about whether it's the version of the whole list or version of the list items, or both. So what I will do is that, because I'm kind of conscious of time, I will add to the chat afterwards, if you get me. So after the session has ended today, I will just add the response.
Great. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Does Lists web app work fine without being in incognito mode?
Yeah, it works perfectly without being in that incognito mode. The reason I'm showing you in incognito mode is because I work with almost like 24 profiles on my local machine, right? So it's just easier for me to fire up an incognito session. This session's in a demo environment, okay? So it's not my own, because I can't show you my personal tenant because of, I can't disclose the private information in there. So you're seeing it in incognito. I do all of my demos in incognito because I just find it removes the problem of caching in the browser. So it works perfect, and in or out of incognito mode.
Great. I missed your question, so I'll just go back. Do we have any reminders in Teams/Outlook if particular task is assigned to us?
So yes, if you're using, I mean, that's not in the context of lists, but if, for example, you use Planner, then if you have a planner activity that's assigned for you, you get a reminder before that, as an email when that is due. So if my memory best serves me correct, it's about a day before it's actually due. So yes, in answer to your question, you would use Planner with Teams, and then that would give you the notification through Outlook.
Great. We'll just take a couple more questions. I'm conscious of time. So the next question is, what is better to use, an alert or Power Automate for changes to a list?
I would say Power Automate, but I'm going from the perspective in that it will get you hands-on and know more about Power Automate, which is a bigger, more forward-facing functionality for Microsoft in the future. The alerting capability is a legacy feature that's been used in SharePoint lists for a long time. I mean, hey, I'm all for using the one that feels best to you, so I'll try them both out. But I would say that if I'm going to bank on one feature being there longer than another, then it's ultimately going to be Power Automate, because that's where Microsoft's investing a lot at the moment. So if you can, that will also, if you haven't experienced it thus far, will help you get hands-on with Power Automate, and that's got a lot of benefits outside of lists all over Microsoft 365.
Brilliant. And just to go back to the question, we've had some comments through from that attendee. So it's versioning of the entire list. So the question was about, where is it gone now? Possibility of versioning in lists.
Okay, and yeah, so the versioning and stuff like that is that, as far as I know, it's not a well-defined area at this current time. What I will do is that if you give me, maybe half an hour, I will respond back in the conversation and just point you to the relevant articles.
Great. I think Chris will leave it there if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I will go through and respond to every single question in that list just to finish off this. I really appreciate people taking the time and to ask the questions. I want them to leave feeling like they've got a response to every question on there. So after the session ends, I'll continue to basically answer those questions until we've got through all of them.
Thanks so much, Chris. That's really appreciated. And thank you to everyone for all of those brilliant questions coming throughout the session. It's been great to host today's session, and Chris, it's been great to have you back. Hope we have you back again soon, and definitely into the new year. So thank you once again, everyone, and we very much hope to see you at the next Reactor session.
Thank you ever so much again for your time.